Hi, everybody. How are you? Welcome. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for joining us for the 5-day challenge Healing the Divide Sisterhood Intensive. This is being recorded and will live on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. So please keep that in mind as you post any comments or want to participate, that this will be recorded and available on the internet. And today we're so excited to be talking about building interracial sisterhood. And I can't think of anyone I would rather talk about building interracial sisterhood with than my friend Colette. Thank you so much for being here, Colette. Woo!
Absolutely. To you this week because I know this is a pivotal week in so many ways, but definitely a good opportunity for us to, just really explore, pour our hearts out, and just really love one another, right? Because it really is about, people coming together and being their authentic self with intentionality and, of course, with vulnerability as well. And that is scary sometimes, but we have to push through that.
Thank you, Colette, for being a role model, for being a mentor, for being a friend. For just so many experiences and opportunities that you have opened up to me, and for everything that I've learned from you. I'm so grateful for your mentorship.
Well, good. I'm happy, to obviously know you as well. I really appreciate that you appreciate our friendship and interaction because I have learned a ton from you, as well, being, so passionate as you are about, equity and inclusion and, just making sure that society moves towards, the good for all. And that's very important, especially in today's climate.
Yes, yes. So thank you, everybody. We are going to dive right in. And today is also a very special day because Maria Corina Machado has won the Nobel Peace Prize. She is a Venezuelan opposition movement leader and voting rights activist. And this is just huge that this opposition leader is getting the Nobel Prize, particularly at this particular moment in history. So, congratulations.
Yes. Wonderful.
So, as we've been doing throughout, we would like to begin with a meditation. So if you can just get yourself comfortable and slow your breathing. If you want to, you can close your eyes, but just try to tune out everything outside of here and go inside and tune in. And as you breathe in and breathe out, just imagine in your head, what does that look like? An interracial sisterhood coalition. What would it look like? What would it feel like? Imagine your workplace, your community, and how would it be different if the women in your workplace, in your community, came together across difference and made things better for everybody? What would have to change in order to make that possible? So just breathe in, breathe out. Visualize the kinds of changes we could make to schools, to hospitals, to uh, every kind of institution, if we were united and supporting each other and really able to stay in community with each other and work together. And now, as you feel ready, come back in and let's open our eyes and resume. How was that meditation for you, Colette?
It felt good. I think, with all the static that's going on in the world, to be able to discipline yourself, to shut things out and really just focus on a good thought, right? Is so important. And I think, we are so distracted, by not only things that in our personal lives and our professional lives, but obviously, politically and socially, as well. So it feels good to, be guided by a voice that says, this is your moment. These are your moments to just really take everything out and, just focus on, visioning what that would look like, what it would feel like, what it would smell like. Right. And I think, that's a wonderful thought there. So,
Yes. And we can't be what we don't see, and I think it's so important. These social media companies, as we talked about last time, um, they derive profit from dividing us. They want us to be in conflict with each other.
right.
And and even with like this week with all the discourse around Taylor Swift's new album and it's like we're constantly being pitted against each other, and who is offering, okay, how to be better, how to do better. We hear a lot of critiques, don't do this, don't do that, da na 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 na. But how about the guidance about how to do things differently?
Right.
That we do not hear.
No, no. And it's almost like we're living in a Jerry Springer bubble. It has come, and, it has come out of the, TV show kind of 1 hour of, garbage, eating bad, nutrition. And now we are now, right, ensconced in just constant division, constant, fighting. And it's amazing until you're able to step back and really realize that there are people that are orchestrating this so that we will never become as powerful as we need to be, right? Yeah,
1000%.
if you're constantly fighting over these little, items in life, again, just a total distraction. So we do need to refocus our energy, our intelligence, our vision on the world we want to live in.
Yes, because that's exact they want us distracted while they literally the Tesla board is gonna vote on November 6th to make Elon Musk a trillionaire. What? We're our farmers are destitute, and we're sending $20 billion to Argentina to bail them out so that their soybean farmers can sell soybeans. It's just absurd what is happening right now.
Mm,
So we
exactly.
gotta remain focused on who is the actual opponent, and it's not each other.
Right, exactly. Right, right. But as long as they can continue to convince us that it's each other, we're not paying attention to, the trillions, the billions, the oligarchs, and all of these deals that are going on, behind closed doors. I mean, a few minutes or about an hour before you started this session, I was reading about, Qatar building a facility on U.S. soil. I mean, what's really going on? So I don't want to get ahead and outside. Again, that's more distraction, right? So let's focus on
Let's
what we
let's
can
stay.
control.
Yes, 100%.
Mhm.
So, if you're just joining us on this fifth day of the Sisterhood Intensive, it's fine, because each day is a standalone on their own. But I would encourage you to go back and watch videos 1, 2, 3, and 4 because they do build on each other. And I'm going to quickly summarize what we talked about in those other videos because I think it gives a lot of context to what we're going to talk about today. So, on our first day, we talked about, what is the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition? And we create safe, generative opt in spaces outside of the workplace for women of all ethnicities and generations. We listen to each other's stories and learn to relate across difference as equals so that we can unite across difference to secure our collective safety and freedom. And some of those spaces include our upcoming Interracial Sisterhood retreat in Barbados, November 6 through 10. We have just a few spots available for that, and we would love for you to be in them. It is going to be amazing. We are staying at a luxury private villa, so it's just our own space, no outside interference or patriarchal nonsense. And you can go to the retreat website off of the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition and learn all about it and secure your spot. And that, my friends, is an actual photo of a beach in Barbados. That is not a AI generated photo. That is what awaits us. Imagine sinking your feet into that. Thank you so much for joining us, Sandra. We're so glad you're here. Good evening to you. And I believe Sandra is joining us from Brazil. So,
Mm.
obrigada, Sandra. Then on day one, we also spoke about what does that mean, interracial sisterhood? And we defined it as a lifelong embodied practice of women of different ethnicities and generations respecting and supporting each other and making change together. Interracial sisters center, follow, protect, resource, and support leadership by marginalized women, including Black and Indigenous women, trans and queer women, women with disabilities, immigrant women, Muslim and Jewish women, under resourced women, and women with intersecting marginalized identities. How does that definition land with you, Colette?
Yeah, I think it certainly is all encompassing. I feel that, when women are able to really consciously just think about, in particular, three aspects: race, identity, and womanhood, and really begin to think about what's the intersectionality of those, and where are the strengths, where are the weaknesses, where do we need to be, educated, where do we need to be, supported, right? I think it's very important to be able to have a definition that is inclusive so that we could learn from one another. And
Yes, 100%. And that is exactly what Audre Lorde said for us to do. Don't pretend we don't have differences
right,
or ignore them or see them as these insurmountable barriers, but use our differences, name them, talk about them, and use them as fuel for our strength. That is where our strength comes from. You and I have very different lived experiences,
right.
but we each bring something to the other person that the other person doesn't hasn't experienced.
Absolutely.
That is exactly where we want to go. So, and on day 2, we talked about unlearning our internalized racist and patriarchal beliefs that we've been fed, ever since we were babies. We've been inundated with racist imagery, patriarchal behavior patterns, taught them at school. All of this reiteration, and socialization to maintain the status quo, and we need to get out of the status quo socialization and onto what Bobby Harrow, who was a professor at Springfield College, defined as the cycle of liberation, which is deciding, okay, this is the way things currently are, but there's a whole other way of being. And it starts with feeling um, love and self compassion um, with ourselves. You see, that is at the center. And then we can start to reach out and build relationships and learn from one another and use that to influence institutions and systems and create the kind of change that is going to ultimately liberate everybody. And we saw that looking at this statistic, on average, white Americans' friend networks are 90% white, and 67% of white Americans' friend networks are 100% white. So, what is that doing? How is that harming everybody, not just white Americans? And I'm curious if you have a reflection on that, Colette.
Well, I think, and just kind of stepping back to the previous slide and some of your comments on that, it really started to resonate with me that we've been brainwashed. I mean, we talk about North Korea and how horrible, that society is because they're all, brainwashed. But I think we've just been brainwashed in a very stealth, sexy way, right? Through media, right? Through movies, through books, through talk shows, through, all of this information that if you look at the underlying message and purpose is to create biases and to reinforce biases, right? I mean, your average, news article, when you think about who they choose to highlight in terms of a crime, right? We're often seeing a person of color, but if there's a white person that commits that same crime, often you won't see the photo. You may see the name, but not the photo, right? And so when you think about that coupled with this stat that's on the screen right now, it's basically white people are living in a white world, right? And people of color are on the outside of that world and really unable to penetrate it if they even wanted to, right? Because it is so self-segregated in terms of, this 90%, the 67%, and the intentionality behind let's just keep things very familiar and, don't upset. I don't want to learn anything or see anything else, or have any other, cues that come in that say, there is privilege on one hand, right? People don't want to admit or see their privilege and that there's oppression on the other end. So I think some of these friend networks certainly reinforce that self segregation.
100%. Beverly is saying she lives in Canada and it's the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I was talking with a friend today about how, the ancient Greeks like controlled people by putting on plays so that the people would understand what was going on by telling them the story. I
Mm-hmm.
feel like the exact same thing happens in the United States.
Of
And
course.
as all these media companies are being bought up by billionaires and concentrated and consolidated, it's like they're literally feeding us what they want us to believe in a way that will just allow the wealthy and powerful to become more wealthy and powerful, and us to just be constantly, even when you're in a public space, in a park, on the bus, everybody's like this. We got to pull our heads out of the phone, folks, and actually interact with each other and listen to each other.
Mhm.
So, we talked about how racism and patriarchy operate on many levels: internalized, interpersonal, institutional, and systemic. And how what happens to us interpersonally is what perpetuates the institutions and systems. And the people who profit from the way the institutions and systems are designed are never going to change them. The only way this is going to change is if you, me, everyone here works on our internalized racism and patriarchy and our interpersonal interactions. That will allow us to form community with each other that will put pressure on the institutions and systems to change, and or we just create our own institutions and systems and leave these ones behind because they were not designed to serve any of us. And then yesterday, or not yesterday, Wednesday, we got into how racism and patriarchy aren't just belief systems, they are systems of oppression enforced by violence. We all carry intergenerational trauma in our bodies from our ancestors who experienced this violence or who inflicted this violence. And it is our responsibility today to do all we can to heal from this intergenerational trauma so that we do not pass it on to the next generation. And we talked about the different trauma responses that people have: fight, freeze, flop, what is that one? Flight and fawn. So, fight is when you react aggressively to trauma and fight back. Freeze is when you just stop, you're stunned, you don't know what to do. Flop is when you disassociate, when you just, get in your bed and stop participating. Um, Flight is when you take off running, you try to get as far away as possible. And fawn is when you think you can prevent the trauma by appeasing and being nice to the oppressor. And we talked about how, not to totally overgeneralize, but how women of color go to trauma responses are fight and flight, and white women's is freeze, flop, and fawn. And so it's like we have these diametrically opposed um, trauma responses that are also influencing our behavior. And I'm curious what you say, what is your response to that, Colette?
Well, being born and raised in the Bronx, it's always been fight. There was no way to survive. You didn't have the luxury,
Mm,
of freezing or flopping or fawning, or you'd never be able to kind of, come back from that. Oftentimes, the message was, yeah, flight, right? So, and again, I'm talking, sort of childhood, battles. But really, when you kind of transfer, those skills or that ideology to some of the social fights and harms that have happened, oftentimes you are fighting and you're just absolutely tired of fighting, right? And I think, at least for me personally speaking, the older I've gotten, flight was definitely not, an option. I felt like I not only had to fight for me, but I had to fight for other women, and men of color who were going to come behind me and have this same experience. So I kind of took it upon myself at times to say, well, I have to teach them. I have to get as far as I can in this fight. I may only get to the third round, but they'll pick it up from there and take it, to 8. So
And Colette, you are an actual kickboxer.
yeah. And I am a part of a fight club. I mean, about 2 years ago, I joined a fight club in Oakland. So it's been, interesting to kind of even parlay some of that mentality into what's happening, in all of our lives as a result of this.
Sandra says the world was built by people who do not want women to have a voice. We need to be louder. Thank you so much, Sandra. 100%. Not only do they not want women to have a voice, they literally silenced women who speak out. They literally, in medieval Europe, they used to put contraptions on women's mouths, like clamps on their tongues to silence them. And Beverly says, I feel that things look pretty awful right now, but I think there will be a great shift soon. 100%. I feel like this is a moment of great transformation and clarity, and more people are waking up and realizing this does not serve us. We have to go through the bad times right now to start afresh and head in the right direction. I'm hoping. Thank you so much, Beverly. I'm hoping too. I'm hoping definitely too. And I learned in a different training that we develop flock as trauma response too. Interesting. Flock, meaning get together with your people, I would assume. That is very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. Okay. So one thing that became very clear to me as I was preparing for, uh, I guess that was yesterday. I'm sorry, I'm losing track of the days, but women of color's survival in many ways has depended on getting as far away from violent white men as possible, whereas white women's survival has depended in many ways on getting as close to violent white men as possible, or at least our perception of who is going to protect us is this. And I'm curious how that lands with you, Colette.
Well, no one wins in that scenario, right? I think it obviously speaks to a deep level of vulnerability for both of those cohorts, the woman of color who has to go far away from this violence, which also on the other side of that violence is some privilege, right? So you're running away from that and maybe running away from opportunity at the same time on some level. And obviously, for the white woman, and I mentioned this yesterday, maybe in the comments of thinking, oh, I'm going to get saved by this white knight, white man, even though they are observing the atrocities oftentimes, but really don't feel, well, who's going to save me?
Mm.
Right. And then, again, being, painfully vulnerable to the enemy, right, and what that must feel like. And again, it brings back, a lot of memories of times when, yeah, you had to kind of figure out how to survive. And in both of those cases, it's a survival mechanism, which is traumatic to have to survive like that.
100%. Um, yeah, I think about how it's, Jeffrey Epstein obviously is the epitome of this, but there's all kinds of societal cover up of white men's sexual predatory behavior. I think about my friend Kristen Duncombe, who was molested by her father's colleague at the U.S. diplomat in the Cote d'Ivoire, and he was molesting multiple like children, young, like 11-year-old, 12-year-old girls. And this US State Department just completely covered that up. He got busted. He had to leave d'Ivoire, but they continued to employ him, and he went on to molest hundreds of more girls until he was finally caught actually raping an 8-year-old girl, and that's how he finally got caught. But it's just unbelievable how much violence is perpetuated because we refuse to hold white men in positions of power to account. And yet they continuously send out this message, oh, be careful of the dangerous black man. That is the person that you need to be afraid of.
Yeah. Well, and I think oftentimes, and maybe most of the time, they are protecting the myth of white superiority, right?
Mm,
And that, white is good and not, eligible to be committing some of these heinous crimes. And so to me, it's sort of like, okay, we have to protect our personal brand, even at the expense of an 8-year-old girl, right? And to me, that is just, atrocious, absolutely atrocious that someone could be that deluded, right, around their own identity that they would sacrifice another human being
mm,
to that level.
yes. So then yesterday we talked about, given all of this, how how can we earn trust across difference? Given that there is this huge divide, and Black women in particular, 92% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris, expected better of white women, and yet in the third presidential election in a row, white women, the majority of white women voted for Donald Trump. And so I posed the question, on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 meaning non existent and 10 being fully, what level of trust do women of color have in white women right now?
Are you asking me or are you asking your audience?
Oh, I'm asking you, I'm asking the audience. Yes.
I would say if you remove that first zero and just make it a minus 10, that's where I would.
Less than 0.
Less than zero. I think the first time you may look at it as okay, they're still in their, kind of fantasy dream, Cinderella dream. But when you see it happen a second time in such stark reality, then you realize, wow, the level of brainwashing and Stockholm syndrome is so deep and so embedded, right? That they can't even save themselves. And that I think, is attributed, attributes to a very, very low level of trust, is that you can't trust you. So how could we trust you?
Mm. You
So,
don't even know what's in your best interest.
right.
How could we possibly believe that you would do something in our best interest?
Right.
Also, given this whole history we just talked about of the social isolation and bubbles, and the
Correct.
intergenerational trauma that is underlying all of this.
Correct. Correct. I mean, it would be ludicrous to, trust someone, with that type of it's just a high cost, right?
Yes.
To trust someone with that type of responsibility. No, you have to. Yeah.
No.
Being
Especially when you've seen it demonstrated over and over again. It's not just one incident, it
correct.
is multiple incidents.
Mhm.
Sandra says, I remember hearing abusive comments from older men when I was only 13 years old. I told people about it, but I was blamed because of the way I dressed. I was just a kid. I'm so sorry about that, Sandra. And we talked about that yesterday, the Darvo distract something. reverse victim and oppressor,
Mhm.
this technique of like convincing women that we are the problem, when in fact we are not the problem. The oppressor is the problem. And Beverly says the level of trust is non-existent. Yes.
Yes.
And she says, I am with you, Colette. It is so, so sad.
Mm.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Beverly. Deny, attack, reverse victim and offender. That's exactly it. Every time Donald Trump opens his mouth, every time Caroline Levitt opens her mouth, use those words. That's exactly what they are doing. And Colette, you mentioned that that's what white fragility and white tears are all about.
Right. Exactly.
I
Ex-
cause you harm, and then you hold me to account for it. And instead of me being accountable for the harm I cause, I'm like, oh, but I didn't mean to. Oh, you're this mean, mean,
Right.
angry black woman, blah, blah, blah. Oh, woe is me, and then all the attention comes to me when I am actually the person who caused the harm.
Exactly. And why wouldn't I be a mean, angry black woman if all of this oppression is I'm living in it? Who wouldn't be? You'd be a mean, evil white woman if you were living in it. So, some of that I'm like, okay, yeah, yes, absolutely. Who wouldn't
I
be?
am in touch with my anger for a very good reason because there's a lot to be
Yes,
angry
yes,
about.
right. So let me not deny that piece of it. Right, right. So anyway.
Okay, so what is clear in this time is that women who carry the most privilege bear the most responsibility to change and shift our behavior so that repair can become possible, so that we can start to build trust. And we talked yesterday, we went into what social scientists, social psychologists have found actually occurs in interracial interactions that cause them to often make both parties feel bad. And I encourage you to watch that video. We go into a lot of detail around that. But then we offered some tips for white women so that we can show up better in interracial interactions in a way to not cause harm, which include practicing self care, making sure that you're getting enough rest, you're not hungry, you're not angry, you're not rushed, you're not tired, but you can be fully present, slow down, and bring good energy, positive energy, not this frenzied energy. Be humble, grateful, and in integrity. Understand the history and the context. Educate ourselves on our racial advantages so that we understand how we got to be where we are. Don't make assumptions, ask open ended questions, don't interrogate or express surprise. When the woman of color tells you something, believe her. That's pretty fundamental. Convey respect with eye contact, choice of words, and tone. Don't seek ally cookies and listen more, talk less. How does this land with you, Colette?
Yeah, I think these are great tips, and what I really appreciate is oftentimes, you hear a lot of presenters focusing on problem identification, which is a very important portion. But also, it is okay. What do we do? What's the resolution? What are some of the steps that we need to take emotionally and behaviorally to overcome that? And when I look at this list, it's a commitment that takes effort, it takes empathy, right? It takes allyship, it takes accountability. This takes time, right? To kind of reverse, the brainwashing and the Stockholm syndrome and all of that, because they're still living in a world where they are expected not to care, not to be present, not to, be humble, not to want to understand the history or educate themselves, right? So on one hand, we're asking folks to make a big commitment, very intentional and have to be, again, very authentic. And on the other hand, they are going to get backlash for this, for even attempting this. But regardless, you got to push through, right? Otherwise, the world will continue to just be, in chaos the way it is.
Yes. Sandra says, we had our own version of Donald Trump here, Jair Bolsonaro. He stands for the same things, and there are so many women who support him, even though he has made it clear multiple times that he has no respect for women. Yes. But one important distinction is that Brazil actually held him to account in the Supreme Court for the Brazilian version of January 6th that he
Yes.
led. And he is facing a criminal sentence, I believe, of 27 years for inciting a riot in demanding that he be seated as president. And I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Eco says, this conversation makes me remember when you invited me to attend a women's event in NYC, and I realized I wanted to go, but was apprehensive about not knowing which other white women were going. I knew you were great and have great people around you, but I just felt my nervous system acting up, worrying about potentially being offended, annoyed, microaggressed, etc. It got me thinking, and I always meant to mention it to you. I'm so sorry. Yes. Well, and with total reason. Of course, your nervous system is activated because you've had all these past negative experiences with white women. You're like, why should I trust her? Why should I make an exception? Am I just going to be disappointed again? And, I feel very terrible about recently. I did something that really harmed a lot of women of color, who gave me very direct feedback on what I was doing, and I took accountability for it. And one of the pieces of feedback that really hurt was that someone said to me, you're the only white woman I trust. So it felt like a gut punch to see this coming from you. And I feel so terrible about it, and I'm so grateful to you, Colette, for helping me figure out how to take accountability for it, and, yeah.
Good. Yeah. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes. It's a learning process. I mean, we all have to reverse the brainwashing, right?
Yes.
That's not just for white women. It's every human almost that is, within the scope of this, environment that we're in. And it's global. It's a global issue. I don't care where I go, what continent I'm on, some of that patriarchy, it just exists almost in each and every society, so yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of effort and concerted effort to begin to see beyond the comfort of just going along to get along.
Mm, yes. Oh, we talk about we well, I don't wanna get too technical, but Colette and I are both administrators of the Intercultural Development Inventory. And when I took my assessment and found out I land in the middle, which is, I think it's called a minimizer, and I was so mad because I'm like, "How could I possibly be a minimizer when I am, like, the most interculturally competent person I know?" Yeah, but that is the minimizer is like again, I think it's like a survival mechanism, not to get too
Oh,
technical.
right, right, right. That's okay. You've moved forward. You've evolved from that.
Thank you, thank you. Beverly says, on both sides, I find that we do not have deep friendships. We tend to stick with our own tribe. And we talked about that. Like, obviously, homogenous social circles make a lot of sense. You want to be friends with people who have a similar lived experience as you and who can understand what you are going through. Plus, you have the same taste in, you know, all kinds of things, right?
Mhm.
So of course it makes sense that you tend to socially isolate. One of the great things I love about the Bay Area is that there is a lot of interracial friendships. I lived in Austin, I lived in New York City. I felt like in Austin, again, I had a very diverse friend circle, but especially in New York City, I although I worked in very diverse organizations, the people who I knew socially, it felt like it was a majority white group. Okay, let's keep going. So here is our new acronym. White women show up as a Karen. Be kind, accountable, respectful, reparative, empathetic, and neighborly. Kind includes being direct. It includes um, not being nice. It means that you are clear and you are actually empathetic and not just trying to please someone to feel good or to look good, but authentically concerned about the other person. Be accountable for our behavior and be accountable when we cause harm. Be respectful. Slow down. Don't act too informal. Learn to pronounce names correctly. All these signs that you are respectful of the other person. Don't interrogate them. Don't ask them. Don't make assumptions about them. Respect them as a fellow human being. Be reparative when you cause harm. Do something to repair it. Don't just hide. Be empathetic and neighborly. So you're not this white woman swooping in to solve problems, and you're a neighbor. You're like a peer, and you're there to provide mutual support to each other, and to just have support each other. Be on the lookout for each other. Does this resonate with you, Colette? You were the one who encouraged me to use my name.
Yes, yes. I think, certainly today with the hashtag Karen and, all of the dust up, around that name, to be a Karen who's an anti-racist trainer, is something that, should be a part of the personal brand. And I think these words, epitomize that. Right, is being able to, first of all, recapture the name Karen, which is a wonderful name, that has become sort of, an oxymoron of some type, into something that is, more humane. Right.
Yes.
And when I look at these words, that's, what I see is the humanity in the name.
Sandra says, "Do you guys believe that this is worldwide, having friends who look like us?" Um, I don't I would think so. I don't really know. I do know, like, for example, Brazil, Mexico, had a different experience, a colonial experience than the United States did, but some of the institutions were very similar, slavery in Brazil, etc. And then when you look at the telenovelas and kind of the way the culture is represented today, you often see, the very lightest skinned people in the country featured in these telenovelas associating with one another, and other groups don't appear in the popular culture. I mean, I would be curious, Sandra, do you experience that in Brazil? Do you see that people tend to socialize? I know that also Brazil, like, people are very, very mixed, and there's lots of different ways that people appear. So I'm curious what your experience is about that in Brazil. Okay. Today's theme: building interracial sisterhood. So I have a question for folks. Um, do you remember when people used to smoke everywhere? Do you remember that time? And when did that actually start to change? And now we see signs like this everywhere. When did signs like this start to appear? And do you have thoughts on this, Colette?
Yeah, I mean, as far as I could remember, maybe in the 80s when people started to be more aware of the health risks around, smoking and the detriment to the body. But before then, it was a socialization. Hey, let's go outside for a smoke if you were at work or whatever. There were like smoke breaks, like you have coffee breaks today.
Yes.
So, yeah, I mean, that's as far as I can kind of recall what that,
Yes.
socialization was like.
And Beverly says late 90s, 100%. I mean, people were smoking everywhere. I remember as a little girl, people were smoking in the airplane.
Yes.
People were smoking in bars and restaurants. I bumped into a lady who was smoking one time and burned myself. People were smoking everywhere. And this continued up until the late 90s. So that we knew that smoking was harmful. The scientists had found, that it caused cancer and all these terrible problems. But the tobacco industry was so powerful that they were able to keep uh, you know, um, keep selling cigarettes. And so there were like communities here and there who tried to ban smoking, and some were successful. But it wasn't until Michael Bloomberg in the early 2000s in New York was able to ban smoking in bars, restaurants, all places of employment.
That's
And
right.
then once it took off in New York, other localities realized, oh, hey, we can do this too. Smoking is a leading cause of death and it's preventable. And so we can ban smoking at the local level. And my vision is just like that. Someday there will be signs like this in every workplace, in every campus, in the community, that this is a harm-free campus. And we all understand what that means, and we all uphold it in the way that we interact with each other. And this is truly what I believe can be accomplished through interracial sisterhood, through having interracial sister circles in every community where women find mutual aid for one another, where we do political education with one another, and where we actually have a lot of fun together. So that is what I believe. That's my vision of how we build interracial sisterhood. It's self-forming, it's volunteer, it's women who want to make this change and know that we need to work together in order to do this. And it would be incredibly transformative and powerful. And I would love to hear, this quote that I love so much from poet Adrienne Rich: the connections between and among women are the most feared, the most problematic, and the most potentially transforming force on the planet. And I would love to hear your reflections on this, the participants' reflections on this. What is this bringing up for you, Colette?
Well, I think again, intentionality and the commitment, right? And I think there are a myriad of ways to do that so that those connections are not only made, but they're sustained, right? Story circles, women getting together and, okay, maybe it's just a half an hour and one woman is focused telling her story, right? And then leaving opportunity for people to ask questions or whatever, right? Not to challenge the story, but to hear it and just take it at face value. Women getting together and going to film screenings, of movies that are, ethnic, race, social construct, driven to learn about, things. Book clubs, at one point, you and I were participating in book club, collaborating on shared causes. I mean, there's so many things we could do if we really just make time for it And as you say, get off of this, focusing on this, and really start, making, opportunities to be with one another and to learn those things. I mean, cultural celebrations, are one of them, and really beginning to just unpack what we're reading, what we're watching, what we're seeing, how we're feeling, that, and then what can we do about it? Right? Because the important thing is not only for us to learn from one another, but for there to be some type of domino effect. What am I going to, I'm going to take this away, what I've learned, but what am I going to do with that? And who am I going to teach about what I learned? They may not be able to be in the story circle, but it's my responsibility to take what I've heard to my circle, right? And then, allow that to just replicate, itself. And I think, we have the built in within our own tribes, relationships, communities where we can do this.
I love that so much, Colette. I recently met Loretta Ross, who is a longtime Black feminist organizer and founder of the reproductive justice movement. She has this wonderful new book, Calling In. And I was talking with her after her talk about, what she thinks we need to do to move forward. And she said, in the 70s, we had consciousness raising circles, and it was diverse groups of women just getting together around a kitchen table or in a coffee house to talk about our lived experiences and to share our stories and to learn to name racism and sexism as the problem and to not blame ourselves,
Right.
to learn from each other's experiences. And I really do believe it is that simple. Um, Creating space and time and connection and relationship and stickiness. It is very important that we who have more privilege head out into the streets and peacefully protest, definitely gonna do that. It is very important that we call our elected officials and do all those things. And it's also important that we build this relational form of organizing, that we're not atomized from each other or working at cross purposes from each other. Let's see. I had an amazing chat with Amy yesterday, and I told her about the idea I have of an online book club to have women come together and support each other. Yes, that's exactly it, Sandra. That's what we're doing in the Interracial Sisterhood Coalition online community, a space for us to come together, talk about books we're reading, share what we're learning. I was looking for I usually have it right here. My book about the Anna Malika Tubbs book about American patriarchy. Such a powerful book. I highly recommend everyone read. I came up with the idea of having a group called Kitchen Table, and you just mentioned it. Yes. Yes, Beverly. This is the thing. We're all feeling isolated, depressed, overwhelmed, blah, blah, blah. Pick up the phone, call 2 or 3 women, say, "Hey, you wanna come over?" And just sit around and enjoy each other's company. So much good can come out of that. So, yes, how do we build interracial sisterhood? We welcome all of your ideas. We would love for you to come to the Interracial Sisterhood retreat. I'm gonna put that link in the chat again, that you can access all of that information about how to join us at the retreat. You can also DM me and I'll be happy to provide that to you. But we would love, I mean, look at that.
Hmm.
How good does that look, Colette?
Oh my goodness. Take me away, Calgon, take me away.
Yeah. Just to get away from this place for a few days will be so restorative.
Yes.
Okay. So we have an online membership community. You can join it from the website I sent you. You do have to answer a few questions, because we don't just want everybody, like, we want to make sure that the people who are coming in are the right people. And this is a space where we can have those conversations and live networking events and pair you up with other members who, like you, are women who want to heal the racial divides among women. And you can support each other as you figure out how to implement these ideas, how to have kitchen table conversations, book club conversations in your local community. And take action together and compare. Hey, this worked really well. I wish I'd done it this way. All of those types of things. And I'll show this Interracial Sisterhood Coalition.com. And for white women who want some more structure and accountability and just time to be in a group of other white women who want to transform and grow so that we can earn the trust of women of color. We have a new cohort of Becoming Trustworthy, a small group coaching program for white women who want to work on changing our beliefs and behaviors so we can earn women of color's trust. Reach out to me. There's a contact place on the website. Reach out to me and I'll be happy to send you all of the information about that. And you can keep in touch with us at interracialsisterhoodcoalition.com. If you download our guide to interracial sisterhood, you will join our newsletter list. We have a YouTube channel, and again, you can contact us on there. And I'm just curious if anyone else has any further reflections on how we build interracial sisterhood. Do you want to share some thoughts on that, Colette?
Well, I think, some of the things I mentioned, earlier, obviously is making a concerted, commitment to it, building the time into your busy schedule, really figuring out, what is it? And again, I think there's some really nice, artsy, comfortable things like the kitchen table. I love that idea. Collaborating around shared causes, I think is, a great thing. If breast cancer, awareness is important, getting into a group where you can, support each other and learn about, okay, how does breast cancer affect women of color versus white women? And what does that look like from the medical community and support? There's just a myriad of things, you can do, and I think that, again, you have to really put your time and effort into that. Because it is as critical as breathing, eating, and sleeping, because we have to, do all of these things in a world that is not necessarily catering to sisterhood alone, and particularly not interracial sisterhood. So, yeah, I just say, get a plan, get a strategy together, and stick to it, and build it, and support it and replicate it.
That's exactly what we are here to do. We are here to support all women who care about this, to replicate and build it in your local community, and build this movement from the grassroots up, because again, the people who benefit from the way the institutions and systems are currently designed are never going to change them. They will just keep doing the same thing over and over again because it is serving them, but it's not serving us. So it's our call is to break out of it and create our own institutions and systems. And I just want to thank everyone who has participated throughout this throughout this challenge. I put the link all these videos, these 5 videos are saved. They're online. So if you missed any of the past ones, or you know people who could benefit from watching this, please do share with them that link. And yes, I just want to thank you so much, Colette. Thank you so much for being on this with me and on this life journey with me. I'm so lucky to know you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you to everybody who tuned in.
All right.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.